If you're Canadian and you're easily offended, this is your cue to politely click away and write a strongly worded Facebook post. Because today, we're roasting all 13 provinces and territories in Canada equally, brutally, and lovingly. And if you're not Canadian, think of this as a geography lesson taught by your chaotic cousin who overshares at dinner. Let's start with Alberta, because of course we will. Alberta is back on its usual 5-year cycle of threatening to leave Canada, then immediately Googling how to form its own currency. In 2025, Premier Danielle Smith is still in power and louder than ever. She's actively prepping a referendum on federal separation if Ottawa doesn't respect Alberta's autonomy. Meanwhile, most Albertans are like, girl, we just want affordable groceries and less smoke in the air. The economy is holding steady for now, thanks to oil prices bouncing between we're fine and sell the pickup Dan. Calgary is trying to rebrand as a tech hub with startup festivals and AI summits. But the downtown office towers are still mostly full of engineers who are wondering when they'll be laid off again. Edmonton, meanwhile, continues to thrive on oil-filled wages, hockey loyalty, and the world's most confusing road system. Oh, and don't forget about the wildfires. In 2025, Alberta had its earliest ever wildfire season, starting in March. Entire towns are packing both snow shovels and evacuation kits in the same truck. Smoke filled the sky so often that Edmontians started referring to the sun as the big orange smudge. On the culture front, Alberta is still the Texas of Canada. Big trucks, big opinions, and an absolutely irrational devotion to rodeo. The Calgary Stampede remains a multi-million-dollar excuse to wear $400 boots and black out in a beer tent by noon. But Alberta isn't all oil and unease. It's also full of good people. Tough, stubborn, hardworking folks who shovel your sidewalk before you ask. But they will also absolutely argue about carbon taxes at your grandma's funeral. Moving on to British Columbia. British Columbia is still stunning. Beaches, forest, ocean views. It's like that hot person at a party who's beautiful, broke, and emotionally unavailable. In 2025, BC is still leading the country in 3 things: unaffordable housing, spiritual awakenings, and evacuations. The wildfires this year hit earlier than ever. March 2025 saw the first state of emergency before spring even said hello. Kelowna, Kamloops, and part of northern BC were blanketed in smoke, while influencers in Vancouver were still posting cherry pictures. Let's talk about the housing crisis. The average home in Vancouver now costs about $1.3 million, which by 2025 standards gets you a renovated garage and a prayer. People are genuinely buying micro homes that are smaller than jail cells. Except in jail, you don't pay property taxes. Meanwhile, the BC government has tried to tackle housing issues with a flipping tax and density incentives, but locals say it's like putting a band-aid on a mountain lion bite. Vancouver continues to be a magical land where people wear $180 yoga pants, they ride $6,000 e-bikes, and pretend that they don't see the tent city forming 2 blocks away. Victoria is still where old money meets soft rebellion. It's where retirees go to pretend that they're still politically active while sipping kombucha and feeding crows. As for Kelowna, it's half bond, half Airbnb. Locals are being squeezed out by remote tech workers who think that $5,000 per month for lake views is reasonable. And yes, the climate crew is out in full force. Climate protesters are back to gluing themselves to art galleries, and because apparently nothing screams save the planet like making a grandma miss her cataract surgery. But we can't deny it, BC is still beautiful, still laid back, still has the best sushi in the country, and still acts like it's better than the rest of us. Which, let's be honest, it kind of is. Don't just remind them of that during fire season though. Next is Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is that province that your cousin moved to for a quick job and somehow never came back. It's flat, freezing, and filled with people who think that a pickup truck is a personality trait. In 2025, the biggest debate in Saskatchewan isn't about housing or healthcare. No! It's whether Premier Scott Moe is trolling Ottawa for fun or because he actually thinks that he's doing something. Moe is still picking fights over climate policies while pushing back against emissions caps and clean energy rules, like it's a personal grudge match. The economy is still powered by wheat, potash, and passive aggression. Saskatchewan farmers continues to carry half the country's agriculture on their backs, all the while yelling at the weather and CBC News. The weather, by the way, remains the most emotionally unstable thing in the province. Snow in May, wildfires in July, tornado warnings in August. It's like living inside a weather-themed roulette wheel. Regina, bless its heart, still hasn't recovered from its name sounding like a biology lesson. It's trying to gentrify downtown, but can't figure out how to fix the roads without hitting a water main. Saskatoon is doing its best to be artsy and cool, but the Wi-Fi goes down every time it snows more than 4 inches. Sad. But let's give credit where credit is due. People in Saskatchewan are ridiculously nice, like help you drag your car out of the snow in a blizzard kind of nice. Just don't bring up equalization payments at dinner, or you'll be explaining yourself until Easter. Manitoba is what happens when you mix the Arctic Circle with a modest housing market and just a dash of emotional damage. Winnipeg in 2025 still holds the national record for most unpredictable weather in a 72-hour period. This is the only city where you can get heat stroke and frostbite in the same week. What am I saying? In the same day. Their premier, the First Nations premier of a Canadian province, is actually bringing a fresh vibe to the legislature. But even he can't stop the potholes. Some of them are so deep that they've started gaining sentience and demanding provincial ID. And yes, mosquitoes are still considered the unofficial provincial bird. If you spend more than 5 minutes outside in July, you'll be drained of all blood and possibly your will to live. Manitoba is still affordable, but at a cost. You can buy a decent house, sure, but your neighbors might be raccoons, and your commute will involve dodging deer, potholes, and at least one Canadian goose with a personal vendetta. Winnipeg also can't shake its reputation as a city where people go missing, literally and metaphorically. The downtown remains a mix of heartfelt community activism and a creepy vibe that you can't quite name. Still, Manitobans are proud. They've got heart, they've got strength, and they've got 47 centimeters of snow coming next Thursday. Again. Oh my God, it's time to talk about Ontario. Ontario is like the eldest sibling in a big family. She's bossy, expensive, stressed out, and constantly reminding everyone that she pays the most taxes. In 2025, Doug Ford is still the premier, somehow. He's been too busy opening Greenbelt land for developers and then dramatically walking it back to notice that half of Ontario cannot afford eggs. Now let's talk about Toronto. Housing is now so unaffordable that realtors have started selling air rights above buildings, as high as $500,000 for the possibility of living there in 2043. The city is basically Sim City in hard mode. Downtown is full of luxury condos and angry raccoons, and the transit system is still trying to recover from a 4-year delay that somehow cost $13 billion. People don't even ride the subway anymore. They just stare at it from above and cry. Ottawa, on the other hand, is what happens when a museum and a government building have a baby. Everything is beige, polite, and under construction. The most exciting thing happening there is a 3-hour debate over the definition of a minor zoning variance. And then there's Northern Ontario, Sudbury, Thunder Bay, and friends. These cities are quietly keeping the lights on with mining, lumber, and a whole lot of resentment towards Toronto. But for all its flaws, Ontario is still the economic engine of the country. The only problem is that their engine is now running on 3-day-old Tim Hortons and blind optimism. I'm so excited to talk about Quebec next. Is that dramatic ex who insists that they've moved on, but keeps bringing up that one time that you didn't label the maple syrup in both official languages. In 2025, Quebec still believes that it's not really part of Canada. They just tolerate the rest of us, like when they let you sit at their lunch table, but only if you pronounce poutine properly. Premier François Legault is still in charge, still focused on protecting French language and identity, which basically means making immigrants take French tests harder than most master's programs. The newest rule in Quebec is that newcomers have 6 months to learn French or leave. Bon voyage. Montreal is thriving though. It's the cool, artsy sibling that wears thrifted clothes and doesn't own a car. It also is still plagued by orange construction cones, which are apparently the official flower of the city. Some streets haven't been fully paved since the 80s. Even GPS gives up halfway and just says, bonne chance. Quebec City remains a postcard, stunning architecture, cobblestone charm, and the highest per capita consumption of maple syrup and passive judgment in the country. But let's not forget, Quebec is also the only province where people will riot over hockey and tuition fees in the same week. It's just beautiful chaos. But despite all the cultural tension, the language debates, and the we might leave Canada murmurs, Quebec is still magic. It's French enough to feel European and Canadian enough to file taxes. New Brunswick is the province that everyone forgets until it's lobster season or someone needs a scenic backdrop for a Hallmark movie. In 2025, the province is still bilingual on paper, but in reality, it's more like English on Mondays, French on Tuesdays, and good luck the rest of the week. Premier Blaine Higgs is somehow still there, clashing with unions, nurses, and the French language office. He's basically playing political whack-a-mole with social services and hoping that nobody says that the hospitals are closed. The population is slowly growing thanks to immigration and people fleeing Toronto's housing prices. You can actually buy a house in Moncton or St. John's without auctioning off. But with affordability comes sacrifice, like working 2 jobs and still having to drive 3 hours to find a specialist doctor. The provincial economy still relies heavily on forestry, fishing, and asking Nova Scotia for directions. Let's not forget the roads. Driving through New Brunswick is like entering a time wrap. Cell reception vanishes, the Tim Hortons are empty, and every second town is named something suspiciously Irish or Acadian, like Tosh or St. Louis de Kent. But here's the thing. The people are genuinely kind. It's quiet, it's calm, and if you can survive the long winters and political confusion, you might just fall in love with the place. Nova Scotia is Canada's East Coast poet, sensitive, stubborn, musical, and always bracing for a storm. In 2025, Halifax continues to be one of the fastest growing cities in the country, mostly thanks to Ontarians who sold their condo and moved east to slow down, but immediately brought their startup culture and oat milk demands with them. Premier Tim Houston is still in office, trying to fix the province's crumbling healthcare system while also battling inflation, doctor shortages, and the fact that every second house is now an Airbnb. And speaking of real estate, Nova Scotia is no longer the budget gem it used to be. Housing prices have shot up so fast, locals are calling it Manitoba. Renting a basement apartment in Dartmouth now requires a background check, credit score, and maybe a blood sample. Oh, and let's talk about storms. Nova Scotians used to get hit by hurricanes once a decade. Now it's annual. Fiona, Lee, Nolan, there's always a new one. Power outages are so common, candles are now sold in bulk next to milk and toilet paper. Culturally, Nova Scotia is proud, musical, and loyal. You will hear bagpipes at funerals, fiddles at weddings, and passive-aggressive weather complaints all year round. They've got a deep sense of community until they blow in from Toronto. Prince Edward Island, or PI, is Canada's potato-powered paradise. It's small, it's charming, and it knows this. This is the only province that you can drive across in under 3 hours and still somehow get lost because your GPS doesn't understand what a heritage dirt road is. In 2025, PI is quietly thriving. Tourism is back, lobster exports are booming, and housing prices are going up. Though, by up, we mean you now pay $400,000 for a 3-bedroom instead of $250,000. Ontario refugees still call that a steal. Premier Dennis King is still leading the island like a well-organized PTA president. Everything in PI feels a little bit polite. Even the protests have snacks. But don't be fooled by the rolling hills and the Anne of Green Gables cosplay. PI has edge. This is a place that bans pesticides faster than you can say soil acidity and gets very opinionated about which potato variety is the best. And yes, they will notice if you say PEI, it's PI, mainland amateur. But here's the thing. No one throws shades quite like these islanders. They will invite you in, feed you chowder, and then tell their cousins you can't drive water down. With love, of course. Ah, Newfoundland, the rock, the underdog, the province that said, screw your time zones, we'll be on our own. In 2025, Newfoundlanders are still dealing with economic turbulence. Oil revenue is down, out migration is up, and people in St. John's are starting to side eye the ferry prices like they're plotting a money heist. Premier Andrew Furey is trying his best, but the province's debt is still so massive. It's like that friend who keeps buying concert tickets on a credit card and hoping for a raise that never ever comes. But here's the thing. Newfoundland has heart and pride and music and fog. So much fog. You haven't seen fog until you've tried to land at the St. John's Airport in May and ended up in a different province. The dialect, it's still incredible. Listening to a real Newfoundlander talk is like hearing a sea shanty and a history book fall in love. Half of what they say is poetic, the other half is just syllables. Meanwhile, Labrador is still largely ignored. They've got hydro, caribou, and maybe 3 flights a week. The rest of the country forgets that they even exist until there's a snowstorm or a moose wanders into the road and blocks traffic for 9 hours. But Newfoundlanders are strong. They are resilient, hilarious. If the rest of Canada falls apart, that is the province that will survive on cod, beer, and spite. Yes. Now let's talk about Yukon. Yukon is like that one kid in class who sits quietly, reads word books, and then wins a national science competition out of nowhere. In 2025, Yukon is quietly becoming a tech-friendly, progressive little powerhouse. The population is growing slightly, and people are moving in for cheaper housing, natural beauty, and to escape the drama of the rest of Canada. Whitehorse is basically a tiny city with decent coffee, stunning mountains, and occasional moose traffic jams. The housing situation is tight though. Prices are climbing, and everyone is arguing about new developments and protecting the wilderness, which is basically the Yukon pastime. The government here is actually pretty functional. They even have clean water, healthcare access, and decently paved roads. So naturally, most of Canada ignores them completely. The biggest issue they have is climate change. Melting permafrost is messing with roads, with buildings, and everyone's sanity. Infrastructure here isn't just aging, it's sinking into the earth. But Yukoners are cool with it. They've been through worse, and they will tell you all about it over a beer while swatting mosquitoes the size of small drones. Northwest Territories is the part of Canada that most people forget exists until it makes the news for something terrifying. Like last year's wildfires that forced everyone out of Yellowknife. Yeah, that happened. 2025 is all about rebuilding. The wildfires of 2023 and 2024 were the worst in history, and even now, communities are still recovering. Roads, homes, lives, they all took a hit. The economy is still based on mining, government work, and survival instinct. Yellowknife's vibe is equal parts government town and frontier outpost. It's the only place in Canada where people wear bunny boots to parliament meetings. The infrastructure is struggling. Supply chains are a nightmare, and climate change is rewriting the landscape in real time. Permafrost is melting, rivers are shifting, animals are vanishing, but the people here, well, they're strong, resourceful, and maybe a little wild. There's also a growing voice for Indigenous rights and land stewardship. Northwest Territories have some of the most empowered Indigenous governments in the country, and they are not just participating, they are leading. Still, getting groceries delivered is a coin toss, and your power might go out for 4 days if the wind looks at the power line the wrong way. Nunavut is not just remote, it's practically on another planet, but it's also one of the most culturally rich and misunderstood places in the country. In 2025, food insecurity is still a crisis. A head of lettuce costs about $14, and a frozen pizza can run you $25. Flights are expensive, jobs are scarce, and infrastructure is barely holding on. But despite all that, Nunavut is proud. This is a land where tradition isn't a museum piece, it's alive. The Inuit culture is vibrant, with throat singing, seal hunting, and art that sells for thousands around the world. The capital is a mix of colorful houses, brutal winters, and wild stories. Like the time the water supply was contaminated, again, or when the internet went out for a week, and no one cared. Climate change is hitting hard here. Ice roads are vanishing, polar bears are moving into new areas, hunters have to go further every year, but Nunavites are adapting. They always have, and they always will. It's not an easy place to live, but it's a place with soul and strength and a kind of quiet pride that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. So that's it, all 13 provinces and territories in Canada. Some are freezing, some are on fire, some want to leave, some want to be noticed, and a few are just trying to survive inflation without eating instant noodles every night. But here's the truth. Canada is a mess. A beautiful, chaotic, bilingual, climate-stressed, emotionally exhausted mess. And somehow, it still works. Mostly, sometimes. Okay, it's fine. We're fine. Now tell me, which province are you from? And did I roast it hard enough? Or do you want me to try again?